Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into one of the most crucial and intense chapters of the war in Ukraine, the story of how Russia's long-held dream of creating a Crimea corridor across southern Ukraine has faltered. This isn't just about a battle on the ground, it's about geography, ambition, strategy, and the limits of power. So let's explore how Russia's vision of connecting Crimea to its mainland territories turned from a confident plan into a grinding, uncertain struggle. When Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, one of its key objectives was clear: to secure a solid land route between the Russian border and the Crimean Peninsula. This corridor would stretch across the steppe, linking Crimea with occupied areas in southern Ukraine such as Mariupol, Melitopol, and Kherson. In Moscow's eyes, such a connection was essential not only for logistics and military resupply, but also for solidifying Crimea's integration into Russia's territory. The Kremlin saw this as the final step in making its 2014 annexation of Crimea irreversible. At first, the plan seemed to make progress. Russian forces swept through parts of the south, capturing key coastal cities and cutting Ukraine off from sections of the Sea of Azov. For a while, it appeared that the vision of a Crimea corridor might actually materialize. Russian propaganda quickly celebrated the idea, portraying it as both a triumph of military planning and a restoration of what they called historical unity. But beneath the early advances lay deep problems, logistical weaknesses, stretched lines of supply, and the fierce resistance of Ukrainian forces defending every kilometer of their land. The geography of the steppe itself posed serious challenges. The terrain in southern Ukraine is wide, open, and exposed, offering little natural protection. It allows for fast movement, but it also means any supply, convoy, or troop buildup can easily become a target. For Ukraine, this was an opportunity. The Ukrainian military began targeting Russian logistics routes, ammunition depots, and transport hubs, slowly turning Russia's potential advantage into a vulnerability. One of the most symbolic and strategic pieces of this puzzle is the Crimean Bridge, also known as the Kerch Bridge. Built after the 2014 annexation, it connects Crimea directly to Russia's mainland. For Moscow, it was a symbol of permanence. For Kiev, it became a high-value target. When explosions damaged the bridge in October 2022, they didn't just disrupt traffic, they sent a message that Russia's control over its so-called corridor could be challenged. Each time that bridge was hit, it reminded the world how fragile Russia's hold over Crimea truly is. As the months dragged on, Russia's Grand Corridor started to look more like a fragile lifeline. Supply convoys came under attack. Ammunition depots exploded after precision strikes. Russian logistics officers found themselves in a constant battle to maintain flow lines under Ukrainian fire. Even as Russia fortified its positions, the constant need to defend the corridor drained resources and morale. What was supposed to be a stable connection to Crimea became an exposed artery, vulnerable at every turn. At the same time, Ukraine began to adapt its strategy. Instead of focusing on dramatic, sweeping offensives, it concentrated on attrition, systematically eroding Russia's ability to maintain and defend the corridor. Drones, precision missiles, sabotage teams, and long-range artillery became Ukraine's tools of choice. By hitting bridges, rail lines, and command centers, Ukraine made every kilometer of Russia's corridor a battlefield. Over time, this approach forced Russia to spend enormous amounts of time and manpower just to hold what it had already claimed. Meanwhile, The political dimension of the corridor became just as critical as the military one. For Russia, having a land link to Crimea was not only about practical logistics, but also about narrative control. Domestically, the Kremlin needed to show its population that the special military operation was achieving tangible results. But as setbacks mounted, that narrative began to crumble. Even state-controlled media struggled to present the corridor as secure or permanent. The reality was that every few months, new Ukrainian strikes exposed the fragility of Moscow's control. Internationally, the plan also ran into resistance. Western nations continued supplying Ukraine with advanced weapons and intelligence support. Each delivery of long-range systems expanded Kyiv's reach, allowing it to hit deeper into the occupied south. What Russia once considered safe rear areas quickly became vulnerable. The flow of Western assistance meant that Ukraine didn't need to match Russia in manpower. It just needed to strike smarter. Another issue that undermined Russia's dream was internal strain. Maintaining such a long and exposed corridor required stable logistics and consistent supply, something the Russian military struggled with. Corruption, disorganization, and outdated systems all took their toll. Many reports from the front described Russian troops running short on basic supplies, while officers complained about slow reinforcements and poor coordination. The longer the war dragged on, the harder it became for Russia to sustain operations across such a wide front. The human cost on both sides has been enormous. Towns along the supposed corridor have turned into ruins, with civilians caught between artillery duels and drone strikes. For Ukrainians living under occupation, the corridor represents not stability but repression. Partisan movements in occupied territories have sabotaged rail lines, attacked supply convoys, and spread intelligence to Ukrainian forces. Their resistance has made Russia's control even more tenuous, forcing Moscow to divert soldiers from the front to policing operations in the rear. Strategically, this shift has turned the corridor from a symbol of dominance into a symbol of overreach. The further Russia tried to stretch its control, the more vulnerable it became. By 2023 and 2024, analysts began describing the situation as a reversal of momentum. Instead of Russia expanding its reach, it was now focused on defending and repairing what it already held. Each Ukrainian counterstrike deepened the sense that Moscow's grand plan was unraveling. Ukraine's long-term strategy is clear: isolate Crimea, cut the land connections, and force Russia to rely solely on the vulnerable bridge and limited sea routes. By choking off supplies and making the occupation too costly, Kiev hopes to turn Crimea into an isolated military outpost rather than a secure stronghold. It's a slow, grinding approach, but it has shown results. Each disruption in the corridor pushes Russia closer to a logistical crisis and increases pressure on its military planners. For Russia, losing the dream of a stable corridor carries both military and psychological consequences. The Kremlin spent years presenting the south of Ukraine as an integral part of a greater Russian world. Losing or failing to control that corridor would shatter that narrative. It would also weaken Russia's strategic depth in Crimea, making it harder to defend the peninsula in the long run. Every failure on that front erodes the idea that Crimea is untouchable. In a broader sense, the collapse of the corridor dream reflects how modern warfare has evolved. The ability to hold territory is no longer enough. Sustaining it, defending it, and keeping it supplied under constant attack are the true measures of power. Russia's focus on linear territorial conquest ignored how vulnerable long supply lines can become in the age of precision warfare and real-time intelligence. The open steppe, once seen as an advantage for movement, turned into a killing field where drones and missiles could strike with devastating accuracy. The dream of the Crimea corridor was built on assumptions that have not held up. Russia assumed quick victories, limited Western intervention, and weak Ukrainian resistance. Instead, it found itself facing a nation that refused to yield, supported by a coalition of countries providing advanced technology and financial aid. The steppe that was supposed to serve as Russia's highway to dominance has become a graveyard for its ambitions. The failure of this plan also carries deeper lessons about imperial overreach. Throughout history, empires that tried to control vast, open regions without secure logistics often found themselves overstretched and exhausted. The steppe has humbled armies before, from Napoleon to the Germans in World War Roman II, and now it has become a testing ground once again. Russia's attempt to bend geography to its will has met the same fate as so many before it. The land itself resists. Still, the situation remains dynamic. While Russia's dream of an unbroken corridor is fading, it continues to hold significant portions of territory. It has fortified key positions and shows no sign of abandoning Crimea, but what has changed is the balance of control. Instead of dictating the terms of battle, Russia now reacts to Ukraine's strikes and countermeasures. Its forces are stretched, and every new attack deepens the pressure. The once confident march toward a permanent land bridge has slowed to a defensive crawl. For Ukraine, this moment carries both hope and caution. The slow unraveling of the corridor doesn't mean victory is near, but it proves that persistence, strategy, and adaptability can shift even the most entrenched situations. Ukraine's goal isn't necessarily to storm Crimea outright, but to make its occupation untenable. Step by step, strike by strike, it's doing just that. The flames over the steppe are not just literal, they are symbolic. They represent the burning out of an imperial dream, the clash between ambition and endurance. Russia's dream of a Crimea corridor was born from overconfidence, the belief that geography, speed, and force could overcome resistance and reality. But as the war drags on, that dream is turning into ashes scattered across the southern plains. And so, the story of Russia's lost corridor is also a story of limits. The limits of military power, the limits of occupation, and the limits of propaganda when faced with a determined defense. What began as an attempt to reshape the map of Europe has instead exposed the vulnerabilities of one of its largest armies. The steppe, once imagined as the bridge to victory, has become a landscape of attrition and loss. Thank you all for watching and staying with me through this deep dive into one of the most important developments of this ongoing conflict. If you found this video insightful, please like and subscribe for more detailed analyses of global affairs. Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Russia can still stabilize the situation? Or has the dream of the Crimea corridor truly come to an end? Until next time, stay safe and stay informed.